You ever find peace just to have it snatched away by a clipboard and a Karen haircut? I was 3 casts into a quiet Sunday morning sun, barely up, coffee in my thermos, and my dog curled at my feet when the shrill voice of authority shattered everything. Sir, you're in violation of HOA Regulation 14B. Fishing is not permitted by non-lakefront homeowners. I looked up, clipboard, Oakley's, matching windbreaker. It was Brenda, the self-appointed enforcer of our HOA, and apparently my tranquil little fishing habit had become a crime. I laughed, thought it was a joke. It wasn't. A week later, I had a $150 fine in my mailbox for unauthorized angling. Yeah, that's a thing now. But this wasn't just about fishing. This was about power, about someone who thought rules were weapons and neighbors were targets. That morning, something snapped. Not out loud. Not yet. But inside, I made a promise to myself, right there on that dock. If they were going to treat me like a trespasser, then fine. I'd become the landlord. And oh, I did a lot more than just fish. Stick around, because by the end of this story, the entire neighborhood, including Brenda, would be locked out of the very lake they used to gatekeep. Let's just say, the bait wasn't the only thing I cast that week. I live in one of those pristine, too-perfect neighborhoods that look like a Hallmark movie set. Every mailbox matches. Every lawn looks like a putting green. And every house comes with a 75-page HOA handbook you're required to memorize, apparently. I bought my home 6 years ago, not lakeside, but close enough to enjoy morning walks, paddleboarding, and yes, the occasional quiet moment fishing at the community dock. I'd been doing it for years, never disturbed a soul. But everything changed when Brenda got elected HOA president. Brenda was the kind of woman who ran for HOA just to wield power like a medieval queen with a clipboard. She memorized every bylaw, took photos of unapproved garden gnomes. She even carried laminated violation slips in her purse. She didn't like me from the start. Maybe it was my truck, or the fact that I didn't power wash my driveway weekly, or maybe deep down she hated that I didn't care about the politics of Petunia Height. Anyway, Brenda had found her next crusade, fishing. One morning, she ambushed me at the dock, quoting some obscure clause about exclusive lake access for waterfront property owners. I asked her calmly, "Since when?" She smiled that HOA smile. "It was voted in last quarter. You should have read the meeting minutes." I didn't argue, just nodded, packed up my gear, and left. But the very next day, boom, a formal violation notice taped to my front door like I was being evicted from a crime scene. Unauthorized use of HOA-controlled property. $150 fine. I thought, fine, I'll appeal. So I showed up at the next board meeting, which by the way was held in Brenda's garage, complete with folding chairs, Costco cookies, and her husband Rick awkwardly running the projector. I calmly explained that I'd been fishing there for years, that I wasn't harming anyone, that the lake should be for the community. Brenda cut me off. The rules are the rules. If you don't like them, feel free to petition. Though we'll need 75% majority approval, and good luck getting that. The smug smirks around the room said it all. Brenda had stacked the board with her minions. This wasn't about rules. It was about control. And something in me shifted. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't the end of the fight. It was just the beginning. Because if they wanted to gatekeep the lake, they'd better pray I never got the keys. And oh boy, they had no idea what I was about to do next. After that board meeting, I tried to play nice for about a week. I stopped fishing, stuck to walking the lake trail like a good little HOA member. I even waved politely when Brenda strutted past in her neon windbreaker. But then came fine #2 littering. Apparently the empty coffee cup I tossed in the public trash can was a violation. And fine #3? Leash length non-compliance. Yeah, my golden retriever's leash was 4 inches too long. They were baiting me, and I was done playing defense. The final straw came when I caught Brenda and her HOA sidekick Carol snooping around my backyard. Yep, I heard a rustle by the fence and caught them with a measuring tape, claiming they were verifying fence height compliance. I said, "That fence has been there for 6 years." Carol actually muttered, "Not on our watch." That night I went down the rabbit hole. I pulled out the HOA bylaws, city zoning records, real estate listings. I even called a buddy from college who's a real estate attorney, and that's when I discovered something that changed everything. The lake wasn't owned by the HOA. Technically, it was classified as private land held in a trust by a shell company since the neighborhood was built. The HOA had been leasing access rights for decades, but the contract was up for renewal. And here's the kicker. The land trust was actively looking to sell. That was it. That was my opening. I met with the landowner the following week, a tired-looking man in his 70s named Gerald, who confessed he was sick of dealing with those power-tripping clipboard warriors. His words. We shook hands. I made an offer. While the paperwork crawled through, Brenda doubled down. Flyers were posted warning non-waterfront residents against using lake paths. Board members installed little no trespassing signs along the trail, complete with motion sensor sprinklers aimed directly at the walking path. I'm not joking. My dog got soaked. Then came the drone incident. I was grilling in my backyard when I noticed a buzzing overhead. A drone hovering like a tiny, passive-aggressive helicopter. I grabbed my binoculars and saw Brenda standing in her upstairs window, watching a live feed from her tablet. You'd think I'd be furious, but I just smiled, because 2 days later, I signed the final documents. I was now the legal owner of the lake. Not just the water, the dock, the trail, the access roads, and the tiny plot of land that gave the HOA control over everything. It was mine. And now, it was my turn. I called my lawyer, had a fresh set of signs printed, hired a local contractor to install security gates at all the public access points. Not dramatic ones, just enough to be official. And then with the paperwork framed in my office and the keys in my pocket, I dropped the first bomb. A formal notice delivered to the HOA board. Effective immediately. Access to Lake Elms and all adjacent recreational property is suspended. All HOA members are hereby trespassing without written permission from the new owner. Cue the chaos. My phone lit up. Brenda called twice, left voicemails about mistaken documents and unauthorized actions. She even had the nerve to demand an emergency board meeting with me. So I showed up, sat across from her, calm, smiling. Let me be clear, I said. You fined me for fishing in a lake you didn't even own. Now I do. And starting next week, the only person fishing here is me. Silence. Then Brenda tried to laugh. You can't do that. The lake is part of the community. I slid the deed across the table. Not anymore. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. But that was just step one. Because what I did next, that's where the real justice began. After I dropped the deed on the table like a royal flush at a poker game, Brenda's entire army of board members stared at me like I detonated a bomb made of logic and legal paperwork. Because I had. But I didn't just want them to feel embarrassed. I wanted them to experience what it's like to be powerless in the face of pettiness. So I got creative. First, I set up a permit system. Nothing fancy, just a simple online form titled Request for Lake Access Consideration. I charged $500 per season plus a mandatory safety orientation, held at 6 a.m. on Saturdays. Guess who applied? No one. Not at first. Then I installed motion-activated cameras, not because I needed them, but because Brenda hated being watched. Every time someone tried to sneak onto the trail, they got an email with a timestamp photo and a reminder. Trespassing is subject to $1,000 civil penalty under local property laws. And yes, I enforced it. The first fine went to Rick, Brenda's husband, for trying to check the water quality. He mailed a check in silence. The next part of the plan? Pure poetry. I partnered with a local fly fishing club, gave them exclusive weekend access. They loved the privacy, and I loved the look on Brenda's face when 20 trucks rolled up with gear, coolers, and dogs wagging their tails down her walking path. The HOA called an emergency meeting to fight back, but they had no legal ground. The lake wasn't part of their jurisdiction anymore. They tried to spin it in the neighborhood newsletter like I was abusing a loophole. But people started catching on. Neighbors who had once sided with the HOA were now whispering at block parties. Wait, how did he even pull that off? Honestly, good for him. Brenda's been unbearable. I didn't retaliate loudly. I retaliated surgically. For example, Brenda's waterfront property? Turns out part of her dock extended 6 feet into my new land. So I sent her a notice of encroachment. She had 2 options. 1, remove the dock. 2, pay me monthly rent. She paid, bitterly, but she paid. I also hired a landscaping crew to clean up the trails, repaint the benches, and install 2 private picnic areas with signs, reserved for lake ownership guests. Each move was small, subtle, but every one of them reminded the HOA and Brenda that they were no longer the gatekeepers. I'd become the gate. But the most satisfying part? Watching Brenda try to explain this to new neighbors. I overheard her once, nervously stammering to a young couple. Well, the lake used to be open, but a situation happened, and now, well, you need a permit or something. They looked confused. She looked defeated. And me? I just smiled from my back porch, casting a line into the lake, while sipping coffee from my custom mug that read, Unauthorized Angler. Because you see, I didn't just get revenge. I rewrote the rules of the game, and soon it would all come to a glorious public climax. The final blow didn't come from me. It came from the neighborhood itself. You see, once the dust settled and the HOA's grip started slipping, more and more residents began asking questions. Real questions like, wait, why are we paying $800 a year in dues if the lake isn't even ours anymore? Why does the HOA spend more on enforcement signs than on playground repairs? Who voted Brenda in anyway? It started with whispers. Then someone created an anonymous Facebook group, Take Back the Neighborhood. Within a week, it had over 100 members. They weren't just fed up with the lake situation. They were fed up with Brenda. The fines, the surveillance, the feeling that the HOA had become a mini dictatorship. And right on cue, someone found out about the dock rent Brenda was secretly paying me and posted it with screenshots. Suddenly, all her speeches about protecting community property started to sound a little hollow. The next HOA meeting was standing room only. For the first time in years, residents actually showed up. One man, John, a retired Navy vet, stood up and said, "You fined my daughter for sidewalk chalk. I stayed quiet. You made my wife get approval for a tomato garden. I stayed quiet. But now I find out you've been paying personal rent to the guy you tried to humiliate? That's enough." The room erupted. They held a vote of no confidence that same night. Brenda was out. The board was dissolved. A new one was formed, more balanced, less hostile. They even asked me to join. I politely declined. Said I preferred fishing. But just before leaving the meeting, I stood up, raised a hand, and said, "By the way, as of this week, I'm reopening lake access, free of charge. As long as you're respectful, you're welcome. Unless you're Brenda." I didn't say that part out loud, but the way her face flushed said she heard it anyway. Later that week, I took my dog out for a walk down the freshly cleaned trail, past families enjoying the benches, kids skipping stones by the water. No sprinklers, no signs, no clipboard patrols. Just peace. And as I cast my line out once more, I heard someone behind me chuckle and say, "Guess the fisherman reeled in the whole neighborhood." I just smiled. Because in the end, I didn't just catch a fish. I caught the system that tried to control me and threw it back, gutted. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But in my case, it came with still water, early mornings, and the soft ripple of a fishing line slicing through the fog. I didn't scream. I didn't throw a tantrum. I didn't even break a single rule. I just used the very system that tried to punish me, to outsmart the people running it. And here's what I learned. Sometimes the quietest moves make the loudest noise. When people in power weaponize rules to feed their ego, they forget one crucial thing. Not everyone rolls over. Some of us read the fine print. Some of us know how to play the long game. And some of us, we buy the damn lake. Now, every morning when I walk my dog and cast a line, I smile at the families enjoying the shore again. No more fines, no more surveillance. Just community the way it was supposed to be. Brenda still lives in the neighborhood. I hear she stepped down from all committees. Last I saw, she was installing a new fence regulation height this time. And me, I'm still fishing. Still peaceful, still calm. But now, everyone knows. Don't mess with the guy who knows how to read a deed. Comment below. Justice served if you stuck around to the end. And tell me, what would you have done if someone fined you for fishing? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you believe in smart revenge and making petty power trip over their own clipboard. Because sometimes the best way to win is with quiet water, a sharp hook, and a plan they never saw coming.